There's a question that's been going around a lot lately, and today we're going to dig into it. Is Squid Game actually based on a true story? Now, the show's writer denied all those claims, but I found something disturbing. What if Squid Game is actually inspired by one of the darkest events in human history? Something almost no one has ever heard of. But Squid Game might just reflect some seriously twisted real-life events that actually happened. I'm sure you've seen the videos about it. Squid Game being based on a true story. Like there was some secret game that actually happened, and there are pictures going around. You've probably seen them all over social media. Those images of a location that looks exactly like the place from the Squid Game series. Now, we'll come back to those pics in a second, but first, let me give you a super quick intro to what Squid Game is real fast. Squid Game is a series that dropped in 2021, produced by Netflix, and it's literally the most successful show in Netflix history. The basic idea? Wait, how have you not watched it yet? Seriously? Anyway, it's a game where 456 people compete for a prize of $4.56 million. But the twist is, you're betting with your life. And the show, it's crazy good. It shows how greedy people can get and how far someone's willing to go, even risking their whole life just for money. I gotta say, I love the concept, but here's the real question. Could something like that actually happen in real life? So the first time I saw those videos going around, those pics, man, they looked so real. The place looked exactly like something out of Squid Game. I swear, my brain was like, yup, this is 100% real. Total bias. I was sold instantly. Like, come on. It made sense in my head. Of course, something like this actually happened. I mean, there's no way someone could come up with an idea this twisted unless they were inspired by something, right? I mean, with all the weird stuff we hear about every day, it just made sense. Rich people making some game where they mess around with human lives sounds believable, but nah, turns out those viral photos, yeah, they were made with artificial intelligence. And this guy, this is the artist behind them. And honestly, all his art is creepy as hell, man. The question just kept bothering me, because one of the photos that went viral, turns out it wasn't AI generated. It was a real photo from a real moment in history. People were actually wearing outfits just like the ones in Squid Game, standing in a place that looked way too familiar. So I started digging deeper. I watched hours of Korean documentaries, read articles and old investigations, stuff that's buried, stuff no one talks about. And what I found was disturbing. This thing went on for years. Thousands of people were affected. And the deeper you go into this story, the more it starts to look like Squid Game. The similarities are insane. By the end of this video, I'm going to try to prove that the writer really did take inspiration from these events. Twisted, brutal events. The place I'm about to tell you about, people in Korea call it their own version of Auschwitz. And you might be wondering, what is Auschwitz? You guys know that Austrian guy from Germany? The one who did all those horrible things to people? Yeah, this is Korea's version of him. That's how extreme this gets. Just imagine what you're about to hear. It all started in 1982 in South Korea, in a place called Busan. A 12-year-old boy named Jung. His dad wasn't in the picture, so he took care of his sick mom. He cooked for her, helped around the house, and on top of that, he was top of his class. A genius by everyone's account. One day, he came home late. He'd gone to the city with a guy from the neighborhood who used to take kids there. And just imagine, for kids from small towns, the city was like a dream. Lights, food, new things they'd never seen before. They were playing at an arcade. That's when it happened. The man left Jung alone for a bit. A police officer walked up to him and asked, "What are you doing here?" The kid said he was just out. The cop told him, "Come with me, I'll take you home." Now, he was 12, and in his mind, cops are good. Cops are supposed to help. What could he do? He disappeared, and he wasn't the only one. So many kids went missing that year. Also, in 1982, a 14-year-old boy named Choi was walking home from school. A police officer stopped him and searched his backpack, found some bread. The cop said, "Where'd you steal this from?" The boy said, "I didn't steal it." The officer kept pushing. "You stole it. Admit it." The kid cried and begged, "I didn't steal anything." The officer got violent, started beating him, then stripped him and burned him with a lighter in sensitive areas. The pain was unbearable. So the boy finally said, "Okay, I stole it." He was taken to the police station, and what happened next, you'll find out soon. In 1983, a 7-year-old girl named Miss Lee and her younger brother were left with a police officer while their dad went to buy something from a store. The officer took them to the station. They also vanished. Young Sing-ho, a 15-year-old who worked at a Chinese restaurant, went to the beach on vacation. While at the train station in Busan, a cop accused him of stealing money. He denied it. Didn't matter. He was dragged away. Park Sun-ai, a little girl waiting for her brother at the station, was also taken by a cop who said he'd take her to her brother. All of these kids and many, many more. So where did they all go? They were taken to a police van, forced in. Inside the van were elderly people, disabled folks, women, just random people. If you said anything or asked a single question, the guards would beat you with baseball bats. You couldn't talk, couldn't ask, couldn't scream. Now, the van part, it kind of reminds you of something, right? Squid Game? A van headed to an unknown location, and no one knew where or why. This one, it was going deep into the forest, to a hidden place surrounded by a 23-foot-high concrete wall. The door could only be opened from the outside. It was basically a prison, and as soon as they arrived, they were beaten with those same baseball bats. For no reason. They don't know where they are. Their lives are just changed. Behind those insanely high walls, there were a bunch of buildings. Huge rooms could fit around 80 to 100 people. Bunk beds stacked on top of each other. And the photos you see online, they're real images from the place. They look way too similar to Squid Game to be a coincidence. Everyone inside wore the same striped blue uniform. And those kids, the second they entered the place, they got beaten. Yeah, with those same baseball bats. Their heads were shaved. They were given one uniform and one piece of underwear. No names. The moment you enter, your name disappears. You're just a number. So far, everything sounds weird, right? An isolated place in the forest. Stacked bunk beds, uniforms, numbers instead of names. Too many similarities to ignore. But now it gets different and darker. Those kids, they probably didn't even sleep the first night, but the next day, at exactly 5 a.m., alarms go off. Everyone jumps up, makes their bed fast. Then a commander shows up. 80 kids, standing at attention, lined up in formation. They head to a huge outdoor yard, and what do they see? Thousands of people, old folks, women, kids younger than 7, all wearing the same uniform, and tons of guards standing in a line. Then they start singing a military anthem. If you mess up the words or your formation, you're punished right there in front of everyone. And yeah, you're probably wondering what this place even is. Why does it exist? So here's the truth. It had 20 factories, a giant church, and let me spoil just one part for you. That church? It might look innocent, but it's probably the worst place in the entire camp, and I haven't even told you the half of it yet. If you're sensitive to dark topics, now might be the time to click off, because this gets heavy. There was a barber shop, a bathroom, a cafeteria, and the whole place was called the Brothers Welfare Center. Sounds innocent, right? A welfare center, a place to help the poor, to give homeless people a second chance. It was supposed to be a rehab facility. 1 year inside, they give you food, a place to sleep, teach you some skills, and after a year, you go back to society, ready. I want to tell you the real story behind this place, all the way to the end of World War II, but I'll keep it quick, because trust me, the history here really matters. Then came the Korean War, from 1950 to 1953. When the war ended, people started rushing into big cities. One of those cities was Busan. Yeah, the same Busan we've been talking about this whole time. Busan's population exploded from 280,000 in 1945 to over 1 million by 1955 and 3.5 million by 1985. Now the rich folks and the government in the city, they looked at all these people like they were trash, homeless, bums, people with no jobs, living in shacks or even tents. To them, these people were a stain on the city, but no one really did anything about it. There was no budget to fix the problem, until a new president took over in 1980 through a revolution. By 1981, South Korea was announced as the host for the 1988 Olympics and the 1986 Asian Games. And you know what happens when a country gets to host the Olympics, right? They want to clean up. make the place look perfect. That meant get rid of the homeless, get them out of sight. The government saw them as dirty, backwards, an embarrassment to the new, modern Korea. It's sad, but that's how a lot of the world still sees people without homes, as if it's their fault, when in reality, it's the system that failed them. And this new president, he went hard. He ordered a massive cleanup. So, welfare centers like the Brothers Welfare Center popped up, and suddenly, the number of people being taken off the streets started rising. In 1983, it was 14,000. By 1986, it was 16,000, all taken off the streets. They needed somewhere to put these people. And here's where it gets dark. The police were rewarded for every person they picked up. Yeah, paid per head, and once you put a cash incentive like that in place, they started grabbing anyone. Didn't matter who. Regular workers sleeping outside their jobs, taken. People who had homes, didn't matter. Kids on their way back from school, snatched. Children waiting at train stations, gone. Sick patients, disabled people, everyone. And get this, only 10% of the people who were taken were actually homeless. 10%. Oh, and here's something they never told you. By law, the police had to get a signature. The person had to agree to be taken in, and a family member had to be notified. But none of that ever happened. These people just disappeared, gone, and nobody heard from them again until much later. You'll see what I mean. The government didn't care who got taken. As long as someone got tossed into one of those centers, they got paid. That's all that mattered. And one of the places where they sent people was the Brothers Welfare Center. Yeah, that same awful place I mentioned earlier. Between 1975 and 1987, over 40,000 people were locked up in there. And now, you're going to see the twisted, sick crimes that happened to them inside. Like I said, there were 20 factories. Everyone was forced to work. Children were made to work long, exhausting hours doing tasks not even suitable for adults, let alone kids. Some jobs involved sharp tools, and if you didn't meet your daily quota, or whatever your assigned task was for the day, not only would you be punished, but your entire unit would suffer too. They were divided into groups, or platoons, each with 80 to 100 people, led by a commander. If one person made a mistake, the entire group got punished, and the punishments were brutal. The drawings you see, those are from a book written by one of the survivors. He drew exactly what they went through. You remember Choi? An interview with him was done in 2021, almost 40 years after all of this. He said that every single day his body was covered in blood from beatings, and because everyone was punished as a group, no one even thought about resisting. There was no option. Choi said that once, someone simply asked, "Why are we here? When do we leave?" Just for asking. They wrapped him in a blanket, and the guards beat him until they dragged him out. He never came back. Choi says he's sure the man died that day from the beating. You couldn't ask questions. You couldn't doubt. You couldn't do anything. Now get ready to hear something even more disturbing. There was a women's platoon too, and over time, many of them got pregnant. Not by choice, not willingly. The guards were responsible. Choi said when that happened, a few days later, some doctors would show up, give the women injections, and the problem would go away. Just like that. And it wasn't only the women. Choi himself shared what happened to him. For 5 whole years, he said he was assaulted every single day. He entered the place when he was just 14. From the first day it began. These punishments and assaults were done in front of everyone to scare the rest. But here's what makes it even more twisted. The guards, the commanders, they were once victims too. You'd enter as a victim, but if your behavior was good enough, you might get promoted. If you became a guard, you'd now be responsible for punishing others if your group made a mistake. And even if you were a commander, you'd get punished if the group below you messed up. So if someone tried to escape, or even just planned to, the guards would find out because one of the victims would report it, just to avoid getting punished with the rest. Even the guards would rush to punish someone just to protect themselves. Everyone was afraid. They were all victims, even the ones who ran the place. The entire center was built by the hands of those people. Choi told a story about how they built one of the facilities by hand. Heavy stones, kids lifting stones, and once, when a boy collapsed from exhaustion, one of the guards killed him on the spot. And here's the even more disturbing reason behind that, one that ties directly into Squid Game. You might have thought you noticed surface-level similarities, but no, there are very specific, dark ones too. For example, what happened to the bodies? They were sold to hospitals to practice surgical procedures and autopsies. Sound familiar? That's right. Just like in Squid Game, if you weren't useful in one way, they had another way to profit from you. And no, this isn't even the worst part yet. There's so much more, so much darker. Now, I know you've probably got a lot of questions, like how could a place like this even exist without the government knowing, especially when the government was technically funding it. They were paying the facility for every person brought in, money that was supposed to go toward food and services. So how did no one stop this? And another logical question, how do we even have this much footage? How are there so many visuals showing people working there? Well, believe it or not, this place ran actual TV commercials. They proudly advertised it as a center where homeless people could work, learn a trade, and live a better life. Of course, those videos were far from the truth. Survivors later said they were forced to act in those promos, smile, pretend, make it look good. It was all staged and done under pressure. And the purpose of those videos wasn't just PR, it was fundraising. That's right. This place took donations. A lot of them. Now, let's go back to one of the boys I mentioned earlier, Jung, the 12-year-old who was first taken to the facility. Years later, at age 50, he shared his story in a documentary. He said that one day, 2 years after he arrived, he saw someone inside the facility. It was his father. His father, who had spent years looking for him, had ended up in the same place. After Jung disappeared, his father went to police stations repeatedly to ask about him. Over time, he started drinking heavily, and eventually, police decided to round him up too. They threw him on one of the buses and sent him to the same hell. When Jung saw his dad again, he didn't feel joy. He felt shame. He said, "We both knew what had happened to us in that place, and it was humiliating. The food inside the facility, it was scarce, barely enough to survive. Although the government was paying for food per person, the facility would simply feed, say, 2,000 people instead of 3,000 and pocket the money. Everyone there was malnourished, thin, weak. Eventually, records showed that the center had purchased over 250,000 pills of chlorpromazine, a powerful antipsychotic drug used to treat schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Why would they need that much? Survivors say the pills were crushed and mixed into their food to keep people subdued and docile. Long-term use of that drug, especially when it's not needed, can cause paralysis. There was even a group they called the zombies, people with special needs who were given so much medication that they moved like the walking dead. They were alive, but not really. Just existing. This place was hell for everyone inside, and I haven't even told you half of the horrors yet. There's a survivor who appeared in an Al Jazeera documentary. He was left fully paralyzed from the beatings. Others came out with permanent disabilities, both physical and mental. Most never finished their education. Many couldn't rejoin society at all. The number of deaths reported at this facility, an estimated 657. But that's just a rough number. The real figure may be much higher. So, who was benefiting from all of this? Meet Park In-Kun, a former soldier, a boxer, and, according to the victims, a man who ran this place like North Korea's dictator Kim Jong-un. No one could even look him in the eye. And that's how much they feared him. And just like Kim, Park believed in keeping control within the family. He assigned top roles at the facility to his own relatives, so no information would ever leak to the outside world. His wife, Lim Young-sun, helped him run the facility. Her brother, who also happened to be the pastor of the church, and her sister's husband, Jo Chun-sang, were all part of the operation. Together, they managed the entire center. In the promotional videos, Park In-Kun appeared kind, humble, and cheerful. He would be shown eating with the so-called residents in the facility. If you only watch the ads, you'd think this man was an angel, someone who truly cared about the people he was helping. But in reality, this man built a multi-million-dollar fortune, especially through the church, which was run by his brother-in-law. So, what was really happening in that church? In the videos, the church was portrayed as a religious center, one that taught Christianity and gave sermons. Park In-Kun even gave sermons himself. But behind the scenes, the church served another purpose. It was a courtroom, and it only had one crime worth punishing: attempting to escape. They called it the greatest sin. Yes, sin, as in religious blasphemy. If someone tried to escape and was caught, they'd be beaten savagely. One survivor, who attempted to escape 12 times, recalled how he'd be taken to an office where everyone would take turns beating him. Then he'd be brought to the church, now turned into a courtroom, wearing a red outfit that read, "I am guilty of disobeying God." In front of thousands of people, Park In-Kun would stand before him, declare that, "In the name of Jesus, you will be punished," and put on boxing gloves, beating him in front of everyone. Imagine the cruelty. Imagine the sickness of a man doing this under the name of religion. It's said that Park personally caused the deaths of over 60 people with his own hands. This was a man who used religion to mask pure evil. After each punishment, he would continue his sermon like nothing ever happened. But the church served two main purposes beyond punishment. First, it was a fundraising tool. To the outside world, this was a Christian rehabilitation center helping the homeless rebuild their lives. Churches around the world sent donations. Victims themselves were forced to write thank you letters to the donors, often asking for more donations. "Please send warm clothes," they'd write. "It's cold in South Korea." All of it scripted, all of it fake. Second, and even more disturbing, the church helped with child adoptions. Foreign adoption agencies saw the facility as a source for Christian Korean children. People from the US, Europe, and elsewhere were encouraged to adopt from this charitable organization. But here's the horrifying truth. These children weren't orphans. They had families. Families who were looking for them. Families who never gave them up. Every Christmas, every Easter, visitors from adoption agencies would come. The children were forced to perform, to sing, to dance, to make the place look cheerful, like something out of a happy camp. Then, those same children were sent abroad, and their families never saw them again. Victims later discovered an underground storage room filled with clothes. Clothes that had been donated. They only had one outfit to wear all year, but here were boxes of brand new clothes, never given to them, but instead sold off to local merchants. Park In-Kun had multiple streams of income. Unpaid labor, food budgets he pocketed, donated clothes he resold, and of course, adoption money. All of this, while the government turned a blind eye. So, how did this place finally get exposed? Accounts vary. Some say a few survivors managed to get word out. Others, more likely, say that in December 1986, a prosecutor out hunting in the woods near the facility saw children working, surrounded by guards holding baseball bats. Alarmed, he took photos and opened an investigation. When authorities confronted Park, he claimed ignorance, saying, "I was appointed by people high up in the government. I'm just following orders." Eventually, he was charged with embezzlement and unlawful detention, but the detention charges were dropped. In the end, Park In-Kun served just 2.5 years in prison, only for embezzling funds. His wife was never charged. His brother-in-law, the pastor, escaped with a huge sum of the stolen money and fled to Australia, where he opened a church. Park joined him after finishing his sentence. Together, they founded a company and now own a luxury golf club, still operating today. Park In-Kun died without ever facing justice for his crimes. His children still run the golf club built on the blood, sweat, and lives of thousands of victims. Even now, many survivors don't talk about their experiences. They feel shame as if what happened was their fault. In 2020, after years of protests and demands, the South Korean government finally agreed to reinvestigate the case. But still, no one has truly been held accountable. Now, let's go back to Squid Game. The similarities are undeniable. The outfits, the facility, the numbers, the structure, even the underground market for bodies. They all echo what really happened at Brothers Welfare Center. Squid Game's production began in October 2020, just months after the real-life story came back into the spotlight in May 2020. The creator, Hwang Dong-hyuk, has always said Squid Game was inspired by capitalism, greed, and inequality, not this specific tragedy. And maybe that's true, but honestly, the parallels are too striking to ignore. So, was Squid Game really based on a true story? If you found this story as disturbing and heartbreaking as I did, don't let it stay in the dark. Share it. Talk about it. Remember the victims, because silence only helps those who want to hide the truth. Thanks for watching.